Hey there, welcome to the Automagic Show, episode 4. This is a special edition where me and Urs went over to Prague for the Autocon 3 event. We were teaching a course, we were doing some interviews in the hallways, and I had to spend a month cleaning up the audio. And by the way, this isn't connected to anything. I've been, wrong mic. So what you're going to get is a 3-part episode. We're going to start off with Damien Garros from Off's Mill, and we're going to have a little hallway chat about, the networks of truth and that sort of thing. And what we really wanted to give you throughout this entire episode is the hallway track, which is, in my opinion, the best part of Autocon. Anybody can watch the videos at 2x speed, and then you can skip forward or whatever on YouTube later. But during the week, it's the people you get to talk to, those little circles that form up and having a chat with, God knows who. That's the magic, and that's where you get some real insight. You get a lot of free consulting. You get a lot of free consulting in the hallway. So start with Damien, then we're going to have the middle be Eduardo and Christian. We're going to talk about Terraform and network automation with it. It's a really juicy one. You're going to want to stick around for that one. And then, of course, John Howard and Urs are going to wrap things up talking about telemetry and observability in 2025. And this is going to be as close to having, you in the hallway as we were able to do, But, that's about it. Enjoy the episode. Okay, so we're sitting here with Damien from Ops Mill, or as I like to call it, the future of network social truth. But they don't like the word network social truth, right, Damien?
No, yeah. I feel like, source of truth has been very controversial. So we're actually going with infrastructure data management platform. But, I feel like it's slightly better. I'm not sure if it's the final version, but...
Yeah, we got to make sure that the initials, when you, abbreviate it, it doesn't spell out a dirty word or anything like that. So
that's a good point. I don't think we validated all the angles yet, but that's a good point.
Okay, so what's going on in the Ops Mill house? You have a lot of things cooking, a lot of interest at Autocon.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's coming by the booth. Looks like, everybody's super excited to talk about schema.
Yeah.
Just had the birth of the feather session and overcrowded at the data modeling table, so that was pretty cool.
Yeah, you were sitting next to someone that I don't think I think you mentioned it, that nobody knew who you were sitting to. So who were you sitting next to that entire time?
I think it's the magic of Autocon. Actually, there's a lot of people that actually contribute to our industry. So, for example, next to me was Phil Scheffer from Juniper, is the guy who pretty much invented NebConf and Yang. I mean, he was not alone; he was part of but he was definitely. Super important people for industry, and it's funny to see that it's been wandering around anonymously for a few days. But that was great to have him actually shared some super interesting perspective about Yang and during the burst of the feather session. So I think it's really showed the power of bringing together everybody together.
Yeah, the Yang has been a bit of a punching bag for the past few years because, of course, the open models versus the closed models again, it always comes down to the vendors, right? That's where we usually complain about.
I think what people confuse is Yang is the schema language.
Yeah.
And then, there's what you do with that. That's what, the issue is more like the issue is that we have multiple schema trying to define the same things, but, we should not shoot the schema language.
Mm-hmm.
And funny, I was working on... Phil was saying, he started initially Yang 25 years ago. JSON schema, the one that everyone loves nowadays, it was only ratified just over 10 years ago. When you think about it, when he had to build Genos 25 years ago, he didn't have anything, so they had to create something. So, I think it's...
I think that's definitely interesting, and if I remember correctly, it was inspired a lot by XSD, so XML schema language.
Probably the way he was describing it is internally in Junos, they call that the DLL, I believe, or DDL. That was the internal name. But ultimately, that was probably inspired also with SLT or...
Yeah, the XML. But I think definitely we have to give credit that this 25 years, and now we are complaining, so...
Yeah, it's a little too like baby with the bathwater, but the baby's already moved out and has a job and is doing well somewhere, and not in our house maybe. But one of the tips that I got a long time ago when I was actually trying to do some internal modeling between firewall rules and that sort of thing was to go look at the open models and the vendor models, because the first place that if you want to do a firewall rule, you can go look at the it ends up, of course, just being a socket connection, right? Like there's a source, there's a destination, surfboard, despot, that sort of thing. But the open models are a really great place to start with. If you're especially just trying to model, maybe if you have 2 firewalls, you don't need all the overhead of a major, supporting every feature from vendor XYZ. You can do a reduced set and that way solve your business case if you're just scripting something to get some sort of focus. So when I first saw Infrab, when I looked at the ACL, you have a ACL demo where you can do firewall access lists and a little bit of EVPN and some of the, more popular stuff that, hey, this isn't supported by someone else for some reason. But again, that's coming soon from the other team. So interesting. Lots of exciting stuff when that comes. I mean, what have you done for me lately? That's my question always. So, would you have any, general recommendation when it comes to modeling? Like, is it go look at the open standards for, like, if I spin up InfraHub and I want to do the layer 7 model stuff, I can of course look at your example repos. But if I think there's something missing, what should I be adding to?
Yeah, so definitely we have what we call the schema library. So it's a great place to get started. In terms of recommendation, it just came out of the discussion earlier. It's like, definitely try to have a model that is like vendor agnostic and that is more like at the working at the level of the topology.
Right.
And then we have what we call the transformation layer that can actually transform into more device-centric models like OpenConfig. And so what we've seen sometimes the mistake is trying to feel that we need to have a source of truth or a data management platform that is fully compatible with OpenConfig, for example. I think that's the wrong way to go about it because OpenConfig is really device-centric, not topology-centric. And so usually those systems, they're either topology-centric or they even have the higher level of abstractions more like service-centric.
And would you agree that it makes sense to start maybe small and then extend if you need more? Or do you need to think about all the edge cases in the beginning when you make the schema?
I fully agree. I think we should start, small and align with what you're trying to solve and, and increase the complexity over time, 100%.
Just make it extendable then.
100%.
Oh, yes. All right. So yeah, like internally, if I'm only running like 1 or 2 or 3 vendors, I don't want to deal with the massive overhead of a big. If I went and bought a tool that says they do everything, maybe they do, maybe they don't. Maybe it's some sort of major platform that has all these bells and whistles, but my internal process is just not there yet. Like I might be able to eke out interface creation on a shared firewall or start doing tagging automatically or something like that. I mean, most people, I think, don't get the budget to immediately, launch into a 3-year automation, not just an automation overhaul, but a business process overhaul, because maybe the business processes are kind of broken because of meat space sitting in between, the meat glue between, it comes in from the order, comes from the customer, then the meat glue makes sure that that goes to the right department, and that somehow the variables get generated. And it's not always the same variable, so you have multiple types of the service. And just doing that discovery, you're gonna need a lot of time. You can't just rush into things without a little bit of planning, at least, or you can do your little bit, but you're gonna discover, and it's gonna grow and grow and grow. So like you say, start from small beginnings, I assume.
Yeah, and it's funny actually. It's a conversation that came up multiple times this week. Like, how do I get started? All that.
Yeah.
And when we were at Network to Code, we were doing a lot of we're doing a lot of audits. Working with company, actually helping them define their strategy. And what we're doing is we're always starting with like, hey, what is your team spending time like? If I join your team today, the new hire, explain me what your team is doing on a day-to-day. And then we would use that to start mapping the main workflow, what actually takes the most time in the team. Then we'll start putting numbers. And the first thing is we will usually actually realize that everyone had different understanding on how much time the other guys were spending on each specific task. And also we had a shared understanding of overall, like, hey, maybe this action takes an hour, but we're doing, 1,000 times a month, where this one, we only in 3 times a month, but it takes, 500 hours each. So we'll get this overall number of hours, and then we'll be able to identify the most time consuming workflow. And we'll try to identify, okay, inside each workflow, what is actually like the sub action that are taking time. And then that will help us identify what was the were the 1, 2, or 3 most interesting quick wins we could build that will not require us to build the entire source of truth on the one. The thing, as you say, it's very unrealistic. Like if you need to build the entire configurations, have the entire network model to be able to get started, you're never gonna get started. So it's super important to really focus at first.
Yeah, that's also like a really good piece of advice. You kind of have to treat in some organizations to feel like you are a consultant coming in. Like if you're not able to get the consultants or get the approval, and you kind of have to start with that blank page and just roll everything back that you think you know, and then just start from the basics like you were talking about, and then try to identify the services, and maybe watch out for those assumptions where you think oh, this team thinks that this is the most important service, but actually it's this step over here that is taking all the team's time.
And I would add, there's like something here I learned a few years ago is super important to start building metrics before you roll out automation,
Right.
so that you can show the before and the after.
Right.
And I remember in one of my company, there was a guy that came that was in charge of completely replacing like the firewall layer and redesigning it. And the guy knew exactly what he was doing. He did that in previous job. He had everything like technical part nailed down in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But then he hauled into deploying it, and he spent another month creating all the metrics that would actually be able to validate and prove to organizations that what he built was actually super effective. He knew it was super effective, but he delayed the project by many, many weeks just so that everybody else could see that too.
That sounds
And to me, there was really this, haha moments where I was like, that's super smart. I as an engineer, sometimes we
take it for granted.
just wanted to roll things because we want to see it happen, but we forget that the importance to communicate to the organization, to have metrics, to have real numbers.
Many times we are really bad in selling ourselves. We work for weeks on a job and then we say, yeah, I just did it. Like we are selling us under the value.
That's the thing. Like you might have a problem with adoption, especially if management doesn't get that clear. Hey, you have to force the guys to use the tool and not use the manual workaround or whatever. We bought this tooling. We spent a little time getting those metrics. That's a completely different story than just handing over the tool and hoping that they start using it because it's inherently good. And maybe it's a really good idea. Might even be a terrible idea. Who knows? But because you have the metrics before and after,
Metrics super important. It brings me to tomorrow. I'm doing a presentation how to build automation you can trust. And my whole point is to say, like, I feel like in our industry there's a lot of issue where we build a lot of tools, but then no one is really using them. Like if you give them to the operation team, they will, they're just gonna keep doing what they're doing, and people are like, that sucks. I built such a great tool. Why are they not using it? And I think we tend to forget sometimes that it's not because we have something that is working that is actually something that is usable for the rest of the team. And we forget that, making it work is only 30% of the work. And, you still need to provide a lot of visibility. You need to provide more, like, make sure your tool is predictable, is understood by the rest of the team. And, when we're building something, we see all of the inside. We know exactly how it works, so we trust it. But we forget that from someone else, it might just look like a black box. There's a red button on it. Let's say, hey, if you press this button, I'm going to get your networking. Good luck. Like no one wants to do that. So building automation with trust, I think it's a process that takes a lot of efforts. And so, yeah, just say I'm doing really looking forward to sharing that tomorrow.
Yeah, I've been talking to some of my guys for some of the scripts that we do internally, just by having those multi-stage ones so that they can actually see what's happening instead of having the magic black box and there is a spinning circle saying it's working, but breaking it down into like, okay, this step, this step, this step. So when the failure happens, you have a full pipeline instead of just doing mystery script X or mystery workflow X, and then a big error, and then just call me when the error happens. All right, bye guys. Just providing that visibility and keeping it semi-transparent of what each component that you're trying to expose to them is doing. And of course, yeah, like you said, by having the metrics, by having, buy-in from everyone, both the users and the owners, it's a very important thing. So it's not easy, is it?
No, it is. And again, I'll share more tomorrow, but yeah, I made so many mistakes myself. Like I'm not pretending that I'm better than anybody else at doing that. I think it's just that
You have the points.
I felt maybe more time than others. So
It's not the scars to prove it. So
Yeah.
Everyone gets burned.
everyone gets burnt. Awesome, Damien. Thank you so much for joining us. Good luck with your talk tomorrow, and have a great one.
Thank you.
Okay, Eduardo, you just had a fantastic talk on Terraform. I'm worried you have direct access to my internal SharePoint because it seemed like the exact same thing that we're going through. So, number one, I need to see your laptop. And then number two, the stuff that we didn't get to talk about. So, there's a lot of action around the state file, especially, when it comes to Terraform. People go in and they go, okay, step one, I'm going to run it locally in the lab. Then you get disappointed with the providers. And then you start fiddling with that. How did the provider journey go for you in your environment initially?
To be honest, the provider journey was the most painful thing that I have lived in my life. We began at least 3 years ago, and in that time, the providers were basically half-baked, or at least 50% of the resources were apparently not working. Or you could at least create something, but it was not able to modify them or delete them. In some cases, it just crashed. So it seemed like the vendors, they didn't even test the providers. But yeah, it comes always about money. If there's a lot of clients using the providers, then they put more people into working for it. But the solution for us was basically taking contact with the vendors and also trying to help them. We started opening issues, suggesting fixes, doing ourselves the coding, and then we saw that the vendors were eager to speak with us. And after a few months, we were basically one more maintainer. We just push go, they ask us what the go, it's fine, and they were also open to send off beta versions and let us test everything that was going on internally.
That's very cool. Christian, have you seen a similar story?
Absolutely, a similar story, and it's absolutely, I can just tell the same story. Issue with providers, maturity grade, and so on. What I see currently is, especially when it comes to these network infrastructure based providers, vendors are looking way more into Terraform now than it was years before. So they're investing more time, have development teams directly working with these providers and so on. So yeah, we see the same, and we see a definite improvement in it.
Yeah, if you look at the vendors right now, for example, Palo Alto just launched a new version of the provider, which is supposed to improve a lot of stuff. Cisco has also launched a new version of the Catalyst Center provider, so it's getting better. I can say that right now it's much better than 3 years ago. So for the ones that are going to try to use Terraform right now, they are going to skip a lot of pain that we have gone through the last 2 or 3 years.
Which sounds fantastic. Now, a lot of guys, that you haven't been using Terraform, and then they want to go to the tutorials and that sort of thing, and then they see that it's all based on AWS. Did you go through any of the official training when it came to Terraform, or did you just go lock and load, I can do this?
Yeah, I actually took the Terraform Associate certification or something, where I took it after I had begun with Terraform. Yes, the tutorials are mostly based, or at least the official tutorials are mostly based in AWS or cloud-based things. But I think the documentation in the actual providers is fairly good, because every time you check the documentation from a resource, it gives you a snippet of the code that you can just copy-paste and change the variables and go on. So there's not too much to change. So I think at least the documentation side of the providers, it's pretty good. If they work or not, that's another subject.
Christian, do you remember the day when you finally understood the state file and the difference between a refresh, an apply dash refresh, and then a regular refresh node?
It's been probably 5 years at least for me. So, and I actually started with AWS. The funny thing was I started with Terraform because we were deploying basically some environments for other networking automation projects on AWS, on Azure. So this was basically my learning path. And then we discovered more and more network vendors using Terraform, providing Terraform providers. So I got into this. The reason why we are supporting it a lot and using it nowadays as our basically standard tooling when it's not custom built on Python or whatever, is that I see Terraform as on the on-premise infrastructure the same as we have it in hyperscaler infrastructure. Hyperscaler side, you build the network, the VPCs, everything, the IP networks, and so for me it's basically the same. On the on-premise side, it's also for me I want to have a declarative way of rolling out infrastructure, and I will go this way through the state file. And yes, we have to. And this was what I really liked about your presentation was. you have to look for the state file, you have to look for security. How do you design the whole thing? How do you build it into a pipeline process and so on? But that's actually the way I see infrastructure on premise in terms of how do we want to roll out? Yeah, and the declarative way. Yeah.
So Eduardo, if you go and look at the generic Terraform stuff, so let's say you're doing AWS or Azure, you're going to see a lot of tooling, especially on the security side. So state validation, I forget the names of the things. This is the part in the edit Steinsy where you put in the names and you sound like you know what you're talking about. But and you find out they only support Azure for security policies and that sort of thing, or the what is it, Sentry or Sentinel in the Terraform. Are you running any rules like that currently, just to make sure that people aren't going crazy in the middle of the night if you're doing direct edits to the?
Yes, actually, these tools like Terraform Sentinel, they're just a framework that you need to write your own validations and your checks to be able to create them. We are not using a Sentinel or any open source tool. We created our own validations in Python. When we ingest the data, we have two validation layers. One is semantic validation. We basically or syntax validation, sorry, we check that the data is correct, and then we do semantic validation in Python. We basically say, okay, you cannot create a BRF neighbor in BGP if the BRF is not created yet. So we do this kind of validation in Python, and we also do like Sentinel does. We read the state, and we put some stop gaps. Like we have some VLANs that are defined as critical VLANs, and we don't allow anyone to delete those VLANs, for example. If you try to delete these VLANs, you will get an error on the pipeline that says, no, this VLAN is critical. Please contact us or someone else.
Is there a similar story on your side when it comes to auditing and making sure that the data coming in and all that is valid?
Yeah, it's similar. First of all, we have a very strict data validation, basically the translation of the input data. It's always read into an input data model. It's that we have some basic input validation, like if some data is missing, just stop here and fail fast. And then we have a very, very strict output validation, which then writes the actual data and the actual code for Terraform. We always write and use the mechanism in Terraform to use an external data file. We never write data and variables directly into HCL. It's always grabbed from a JSON, YAML, whatever. And this is probably where we do it slightly different. We always have at least a data repository where just the code lies, and this code is basically imported during your pipeline process. And validation like semantic validation, like rules, security rules, redundancy rules are basically built into a process where when this data is written to this repository, and barely anyone has access to this data repository. So we are using the tools around. We're using GitLab to pinpoint and secure down this repository and make sure that no one basically can do changes on the repository data and on the written data. So this is the most secured part, I would say, on our side, which gets also monitored through Git, where Git is a nice mechanism where you use the Git commit history and everything to basically monitor was anything changed in the process. Yeah.
That you mentioned without failing fast is also really important with Terraform, because if you let wrong data come into the Terraform, maybe Terraform will go through 1,000 objects before seeing that the data is wrong, and then it will fail. So you are really wasted like 10 minutes of your time only to see that it was going to fail. If you just stop at the input layer of the validation, then you don't need to run the whole pipeline just to see that, oh, this data was so wrong.
Exactly. Now, when it comes to some of the bigger projects like orchestration and that sort of thing, in your talk, of course, you're using GitLab for the actions. Any thoughts or concerns or anything that you're excited about in that space, or recommendations?
Yes, I cannot go into too much details because of NDA, but we are looking to moving into another source of truth. Basically, we're creating a distributed source of truth. It's based on Netbox, that I can say, but we are developing our own plugins and our own models inside Netbox to be able to support like a northbound, southbound API. So basically, the inputs are going to come via API to Netbox, and we are creating some work runners ourselves that are going to trigger the pipelines based on the input data.
That's very exciting. We've had some look at some of the custom object stuff from Netbox, and that's going to allow us to actually finally start modeling the specific values. Now, Christian, you on the other hand, you have been messing around in a similar direction that we have internally. InfraHub, the Marco generator, will throw some links in the chat notes, but what's your general thoughts on, like, is that the most exciting thing that you've seen recently?
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, we are having a look into the InfraHub solution for almost a year now. I mean, basically since it was announced at Autocon 1. And the interesting part for me was that I've seen Netbox as a bit too limited for ACI and also basically going further than the network itself. I see automation also on the infrastructure layer. We have Kubernetes installations, we have OpenShift in our network, and it's tightly integrated more and more. We have VMware and all that stuff. So I'm pretty excited in what we are currently doing and trying to do with InfraHub. And it's basically the same as you just said it. We are currently at the same place where we are trying to find let's say a source of truth solution, which is basically feeded from the workflow side. So there's a workflow, the workflow is feeding data into the source of truth. Source of truth is providing data on a reliable way. We can do things like auditing and have an history and everything. And then we are grabbing this data and then basically pushing it to the infrastructure.
Yeah, I agree with the Netbox being the best tool for the job right now, and that's why we saw the need to deploy our own code, our own plugins, our own workers, everything. So we are using Netbox like a base ground to pop this up. But yeah, we did look into InfraHub. I think at the time we did look at it. It didn't support the branching, but I think it does now. So maybe we will just come back into it. I don't know.
At the end of the day, it's for me personally, I mean, you have evaluating things and all these tools will probably work at the end of the day if you have to put in some effort in it. All these tools, they have their advantages and disadvantages and pros and cons. I have some colleagues who work on one of the largest fabric sites in Europe actually, and they're deploying everything through Netbox, and even actually vanilla Netbox, so it's not an Autobot or something, and they also build their own tooling, their own plugins, and it works for them. So at the end of the day, this is the important part, what works for you. But we have to say, and this is also a part that I liked about your presentation, was you are working with healthcare providers and so on. So you are working for your clients, and this is we are in the same spot. We are an integrator. When we are doing evaluation, when we are doing implementations of network automation, we will have to make sure that our clients' networks are just running. Yeah. I mean, I would say we are in a. If you're trashing your own network, yeah, it's not fine. If you're trashing other people's network, yeah, that's where we definitely need to do good evaluation, good tooling, and design, going from the requirements over design, over security aspects, and so on, backup on the state files, yeah, all these things.
So, real question is, when you go into this space, we only started the Terraform journey about a year ago exactly, and the first 3 months it was just tool discovery. So, one of the coolest things that I found immediately, especially coming from a Python background similar to you, was the Pulumi HCL to, they maintain a little Python object to HCL back and forth sort of thing. Any tools or recommendations that people like, you can't wake up in the morning without?
Not really. I think the most important is that we use the dev containers to be able to spin up, or all the developers can have the same environment when they are going to test and develop their modules or test the Terraform code. At the beginning, we didn't have this, so it was a mess. It worked on some computers, it worked on other computers, so it was a big mess. Like around 6 months ago, we started with the dev containers. So now we open VS Code. It just opens a dev container. So everyone is working in the same environment with the same plugins, with the same Python packages, the same Terraform version is also important. So that made the speed of the development much faster and easier for us to just integrate between us. Like if I'm going on vacation, one of my friends, my coworkers, he can take over my coding, and he has the same environment as me. So I don't need to do anything crazy for get him up to speed.
Very solid advice. Christian, any advice for the kids out there?
Yeah, there's great advice. Definitely, we've been there, went through the same. We've talked about Terraform state files earlier and splitting up states, which is definitely something you should definitely do on larger environments. I mean, we are pushing around 300 to 400 pipeline runs per day on some of the environments. What a tool that I really like is shameless plug here for these guys is Terramate. Terramate really helped us on this journey. My colleagues on the AWS side, they love TerraGrunt, but this is a wrapper. The reason why we decided against the wrapper was we still wanted this vanilla HCL to be able to be there if you want to change something. So don't go into some kind of vendor lock. But it really helped us in going in scaling up these projects and still maintaining them. I mean, you can do split ups with different projects, and then you have probably 10 or 20 or 30 repositories with independent pipelines, and you just orchestrate these. Might work, but sounds horrible to me. So I want to have everything in a single repository, and this was basically the way we achieved this. So I really like this one.
Completely agree. We have like one repository per location or per more or less per hospital-ish. But if we were to split in tenants or in configuration and so on, having one repository per state file is something that just doesn't scale. So these tools, either a wrapper or a tool like Terramate that can help you with this, it's a must.
So, like, if we go and wind it back, so let's say that you had a manager from 10 years ago that first saw Terraform and thinks it's going to end up being a 40,000 line HCL file. It doesn't know anything about modules or anything like that. There's been a lot of stuff around the import function after 1.5, and then, of course, there's the whole tofu debacle, which if we started on right now, we would spend the next 30 minutes just crying. Not that tofu is bad, it's just that after they changed the license, it resulted in certain changes in the environment and community, fracture. Unfortunately, once IBM acquired Terraform and Ansible, they put it together and made Terrable. Put it together. Now, when it comes to modules and that sort of thing, like if you were getting started, would you recommend wrapping a certain service? Or let's say that you have a shared firewall or something very simple, like one shared switch in the corner, and you want to wrap the VLAN creation and maybe the registration in NetBox or something like that. Would you recommend people to go with the huge mega project, or to try and get it into small modules and smaller state files, like you said in your talk?
No, it's always easier and better to start small. Make a Lego, a building block. If you try to shoot too high, it's gonna fail. So it's also better to start small and build from it. Just start with a small module, just to create one VLAN, for example, and then build on and on and on. And suddenly, after 3-6 months, you maybe are automating everything. But always start small. It's my opinion.
Christian, you'd like to start small as well?
Yeah, absolutely, always. But on the maturity, or basically when you go on, everything in Terraform currently for us is a module. Everything is based on modules. So it is, from the design pattern perspective, definitely a good way. Also the same with Ansible, to be honest. I don't like writing Ansible playbooks and putting all the tasks in the playbook. I start, even if it's a very small task, start beginning writing roles. And I would encourage everyone to do, basically from the design pattern perspective, to do the same, because it's the way to scale, even if it's just 1-2 tasks or one little steps, because you can basically adapt this, and you can scale with it, and you already know what you have to do in terms of using modules, using roles. So as a design perspective, I would always go this way.
Yeah. In Terraform, using modules, even if you're not going to reuse a module because you don't have another pipeline that uses the same module, it helps with code organizing and organizing the variables and knowing exactly which module is using which variables. So even if you're not going for the reusability, just the readability or readability, and to be able to easily look into the code and find where is a resource, it helps with, of course, having modules.
And it helps a lot when you do develop new versions of stuff. versioning, like changing versioning and all these things. That's where models help. That's where roles help, and so on. With different versions of code and different versions for deployment.
So I think we're all big fans of GitLab and having a Terraform module registry instead of GitLab, making sure that the version is also kept in there. Even if you're not going to reuse it, it'll, do you distribute or do you just keep it in the folder usually to begin with at least?
Again, I cannot go into details, but we are running in a closed environment. So we have a pipeline that runs in the side that basically downloads the version that we want from the registry and stores them locally. And we are only using that version that is stored locally because it's a closed environment that cannot have access to internet. So we are using basically a local copy of a specific version of the Terraform module or Terraform provider, sorry. And each time we want to grade or downgrade this module, we need to do some changes on the variables. Then it runs this pipeline, builds this runner or container again with the new version, and then that's the container that we use to run our pipelines.
So that makes sense. Yeah. So, guys, you can prepare for the controversial opinion part because I'm going to have to ask for one controversial opinion. But before we do that, Terraform import in the state file, just to circle back on that. Some people, crazy lunatics, I'm not one of them, maybe I am, like to just dynamically generate a massive import schema, and then start from that and then apply the change and then nuke the state file basically after they're done with their operation. So in some crazy environments that might make sense, but you guys are running a continuous state file, right?
Yes.
Like adults.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And you do not condone this terrifying practice.
We are investigating currently one thing, and this is basically has to do with manual emergency changes, things like this. Currently, our practice is also if someone's doing a manual change on a target environment, they have to inform and we have to update the source data. That basically at least with the next run, Terraform tells us, okay, I don't have anything to change here, or I just update the state. Works pretty well with some solutions. With others, it's a bit different. With especially Cisco ACI that you mentioned, it's actually quite easy because it basically just updates the state file. What we are investigating is to have a way of using audit logs from the target systems or some things like accounting logs where we basically pull this information, what got changed manually. Put this into what we already talked about, into some kind of, into the source of truth, or basically make a workflow out of this, and then get this approved or not approved. So basically having the approval process in terms of, is this change allowed, yes or not? Validating this after the manual change got done, but doing this in a process way. Reason for this is, we are also acting in regulated environments, means someone wants to see what got changed and who did the change, and having these information all together in one place, even for automated stuff, but also manual stuff, would be great. This means that we would probably also update the state file more or less directly, but only in atomic changes, only the things that got changed. We are investigating this, but we are not there yet.
Exactly. The brownfield change in the middle of the night. This also came up as a requirement for us internally because we're all assuming that, some superhero is going to come online and have to, rescue this thing and that. And that kind of comes into the continuous runner of the plan state or the refresher of the plan state to, detect the drift. You can have that running every hourly. Currently, I am working on staging with having basically, because we have this central radius system. So as soon as somebody manually logs in, if it was Takax, I could get the config. Oh, great. The config was pushed. Okay, rerun Terraform, make sure that everything's okay. Get that kind of loop going. So you could have multiple webhooks, trigger multiple events, and that sort of triggers into your alerting. And then the Slack bot comes in and goes like, hey, Bobby was changing this. What is going on? Guys, what should I do? But have you guys been messing any we don't get the close without mentioning AI or MCP. I'm sorry. I don't make the rules. Okay. So we've seen some people messing around with having limited input files that would allow an MCP server to import that, make an edit to the state file via chatbot, basically like, hey, drain this link, or hey, commission this VLAN. If it doesn't exist and there's zero conflict, sure, you can have the resource. If not, is there anything that excites you about this space? Anything that worries you about this space?
I think it's something that it's coming, at least for us in the health environment. We cannot fully use yet because we are speaking about health data, patient data, and sensitive data, we cannot expose to any LLM right now. But we are using at least now like basic tooling like GitHub Copilot that goes through our pull requests and checks for security problems and so on. So we are doing some basic use of AI. MCP might come later on, but at least in the environments I'm working on, it's a no-go right now. We need to get approval from the government first before we can use them.
Similar thing here, Christian.
Yeah, pretty similar. It will come. There will be more usage of it also on the configuration side. What we are more interested in currently is things like troubleshooting, things like analyzers, security and regulation analyzers. So basically having a second pair of eyes or a third pair of eyes to basically check what you're doing and if it fits the regulations that you have and the requirements that the customer is giving you. So basically, yeah, getting this together.
That sounds kind of like it. Now, guys, the controversial opinion. Anything that you would, I can change your voices, and this is where I put on the, criminal interview sound. Guys, anything really controversial that you would like to share, or you think you would be ostracized for? And this is where I blur their voices.
No, really. There's no secret, but I can say I have. They know about this. At least 3 years ago, many of the Cisco providers, and I will just point a finger there, at least Catalyst Center and some others, were in a very bad state. But working together with them, they were really open and they helped us. And in the last 2 years or 1 year, it has been getting much better. Now, basically, all the resources, they work right now.
Right.
But I can say it's not a secret, 3 years ago, 50% of the resources, they just didn't work at all.
We're definitely seeing a similar thing. The Catalyst Center API, just the fundamental API, is better than the, let's say, Meraki API, which does not expose full functionality. That means, of course, that the Terraform provider is not going to expose full functionality. We've been talking a little bit about getting a star rating system going, basically, on per vendor, per provider, because, of course, the registry, if you just look at it, the first star registry is there 100 issues listed? And are they closed? Is incomplete, all of them? So we've been seeing a lot of that, but again, it always comes down to like, what is the Terraform provider written in? Is it the REST API? Is it gRPC? Is it this, that, and the other? Have you seen any? Yeah, we named Papa Cisco. It's always good to pick on Big Boy, but is there anyone who's been doing a really good job for you that you want to highlight as just being amazing?
I also want to say Cisco, at least the ACI provider.
Yep.
We have had almost no issues. Almost every resource they work from day one. Some small stuff like some description that was not changed or some data that was not saved into the state, but nothing that breaks. And the last few months they have been migrating to the new version of the Python of the Terraform SDK. And I'm actually trying to help them to get that going on, like giving back to the community.
Fantastic. Christian, you got any?
First of all, the controversial stuff, I hope it's not that controversial, but and it was mentioned yesterday in 2 presentations. First of all, from Claudia, and then it was later on where this unicorn was meant. The unicorn, basically the network engineer, now also developer. I would say I'm also not one of these guys who say DevOps or net DevOps is dead or something. I really don't think so, but I have this very strong opinion that if you really want to do it at scale and on a high quality way, it's you still need these very these senior network engineers who know the product and know the design and do these things, and you need some developers who really know their work and their stuff. So basically, who can apply things like solid principle and stuff, and know what it is actually. And I'm happy for everyone who discovers another branch for them, like network engineers now discovering automation for them and everything. At the end of the day, I would say for successful projects, you need a team of people who can do this together, having an understanding of each other and each other's work. Can build bridges between these departments, but you need specific skills on a high level, in my opinion, for sophisticated project, as you probably also have it, especially in these environments, right?
I agree with that. Like a network engineer can always begin to code, but I feel like we are never going to be as good as a software developer that is studied for that. So I agree with you. I saw about Claudia yesterday, or the other presentation that saw the unicorns, and I completely agreed. Like sometimes it's difficult to convince the leaders that we need both. We need network engineers and software developers to work together, but we really do. In order to produce good code and like business grade network automation, I think everyone should make this like team of both network and developers.
That sounds like really solid advice. I can tell you, when I have to pull out the CCA and my bachelor's degrees in computer science, I can promise you that you are not going to see your kids if you try to stay up to date with the product side. That's why it's so good to have full-on expert focused network engineering that has some coding opinions, or is going up the ramp, versus trying to burn yourself out doing 14-hour days. You can do that for a little while, but then you realize that, oh God, I haven't written tests in months, and I've been hard coding tests. I'm little more than a vibe coder at this point. Oh God, oh God. So guys, thank you so much for joining us. Autocon, big fun. I think you've had a lot of interesting conversations. Guys, just thank you so much for your time, and
Thank you.
have a fantastic conference.
Thank you.
So I'm here with John Howard from Proton. You're making some noise about observability and hackathon. Can you tell a bit about your idea or your vision?
Yeah, well, making some noise is somewhat of a skill of mine. I've refined the art over many years. But I find that a couple of weeks ago I was back home in Zurich, and we were talking to. I was attending the Packet Fest event, and I got to see Thomas Graf up on stage giving a demonstration of the MMOP working group activities around how service providers are actually taking telemetry forward into something that's not just a signal of packets that are coming through an interface and PGP sessions that are up, and turning it into something that's actually actionable. One of the things that really fascinates me about the way that the IETF have taken this forward is that it's no longer just metrics, it's actually insights. And that's something that we in the data center miss. So, Proton is we're all about making privacy the default. It's the future for us is an organization and a business that is helping people retain their data sovereignty and not be creepy about, your email and where you're visiting and who you're talking to. And that means I can't use the public cloud. I have to do everything on premise, which means I am a web scaler, I guess you would say. Multiple data centers, classical spine leaf fabrics. So I have a lot of servers in a lot of places generating a lot of heat. And I need to know what's going on with those things inside. So if I want to see what's happening, I really do need to know, I need states, I need metrics, I need actionable intelligence at the moment it happens. And really, the state of the art for so many people in the data center remains SNMP.
Which is SMP is not it's not instant, right?
Well, it's not even state of the art.
It was 25 years ago.
It's fantastic in what it can give you, but let's face it, it's a polled system, and most people are running at a 5-minute system as well, a 5-minute refresh interval, and it's not cutting it in the modern age. And the service providers have all these cool toys. I want the cool toys too.
And SNMP cannot give you all the details, right? You only have the metrics from the box, but you probably also want some stuff from the package. You want to have insights of the routing protocols. So I believe you need more than just some counters.
I think that you're right. There is telemetry is not the story on its own. If I have a GNMI subscription that tells me a bunch of packet counts and stuff, and that's only part of the story. One of the things that was interesting about the conversation here at Autocon today was in one of the breakouts we were talking about the how it is that metrics on their own are one facet of a very large, broad ecosystem of things. So there's also things like flow data. There's so you can see whether or not traffic has been lost along the way or has gone in the wrong direction. You've also got things like logging. Now, logging is a classic thing that is mostly just a load of text, but inside of that text are insights. And if you can extract that information, store it in numerical formats or whatever formats, you can now start to compute on top of that. One of the things that we see from the NMOP conversation is that they correlate logging, BMP, which is the BGP monitoring protocol, telemetry from the box, as well as flow data. And they're able to sit there and say, oh, on this given day, at this given time, there was definitely a disruption to this customer. And as we follow that back from a guy rang up and said there was a problem on Wednesday at 2, we can see there was also a BGP reconvergence event. What was that? That was an interface going down. Why was that? There was an optic that had a failure. What happened next was, oh, well, it got better. But now we have a problem. We need to go and send a guy in and replace the optic because the light levels are very, very dodgy. Of course, you don't have these tools.
And in the end, you want to combine this with AI so that you see the error before it happens, maybe, in the future.
We can call it AI, but I think realistically, that's just that's closer to the machine learning side of things, which is anomaly detection, z-scores, standard deviations, things like this. You don't need to invoke the AI hammer right here, but you are right that when you have this in a database that is programmably accessible, then you can put these things together in a way that you really didn't expect. So it's power to turn insights out of metadata.
But nowadays you have to call it AI because machine learning itself is not sexy.
Got to sell the money. Got to sell the big money, man.
You have to use the buzzwords, right?
Yeah, you go. Yeah.
But
got to get them clicks.
when we come back to the IETF, they are doing really cool stuff, right? And they are the big companies, and they have the tool and the engineers to build all the stack. But you from Proton, you're not this big player. Right.
Well, we're big players.
You're big player. Where they don't have the resources.
It's a different industry. I think it's very important to remember that the networking industry for a long time has been split into these 3 buckets. There's the campus, there is the data center or the enterprise, and then there is the service provider. The service providers, obviously, they're monetizing their network very heavily. It is their business. So they are going to invest in data center, developers who can build this tooling with a single motivation in mind of turning the information that comes from the platform into information that they can sell or stop them losing money, which is the operative word in many cases. In the data center, it's smaller organizations, smaller. So in that situation, the network is supporting the business. It is not the business itself.
Yeah.
So it's harder to justify.
It does not provide money, it just costs money. But it's necessary.
It's a very strong phrasing. I would challenge you in a couple of areas of that, but close. I agree with you in principle.
Yeah.
It is not the revenue stream, and it is a cost center, but we have to be careful not to overly lean into that story, because then we kind of start to lie to ourselves about what it is we can actually do to influence the future.
I think they are extremely important. The network itself, it is the foundation for everything. And
network down every 10 seconds, right?
the network or DNS.
Everyone loves to complain, so it must be important.
Yeah, but that's also the reason why you now need more insight into the network, that you could faster react on events.
Absolutely true.
Immediately mitigate some issues on one spine or leaf and not affect the applications.
Absolutely true. So one of the things that's different, I guess, from the service providers is kind of the weirdest analogy I could think of when I was saying in the room earlier on was a service provider network is like the bowl of spaghetti that's been thrown on the table. That map that you see in front of you is a service provider backbone. There are links that go in somewhere odd directions. Not everyone is clean, not everyone goes in a symmetrical format either. One link going down could actually create a huge latency or congestion problem to an entire portion of their network. In the data center is way more deterministic. We have spine leaf links, we have end spines, we have X links between everything. So we have a lot more resilience built into the platform, which means that in some cases we can tolerate those failures a lot easier.
I think a classical fail like link down is not so dramatic.
Shouldn't bother anyone.
But a link that is almost failing or slower somehow, that is the pain, right?
Absolutely agree. So knowing what is happening in real time is how you can actually prevent an issue turning into a problem.
Yeah.
From the P2 to the P1 to the P0 to get me out of bed. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So what I would love to see in the next cycle of the IETF, and also in fantastic conversations I've been having this week here in Prague, is how it is that we can get a more rounded user experience for someone in a data center setting who wants to be able to make use of telemetry in this way. Because today, everybody is doing this themselves. We all live in our own little walled garden. We've got our big high walls. Every now and again, we pop our head up and go, hi, everybody, when we come to these things and do stuff. But we then retreat back to our house and we build our GNMI telemetry stack with Grafana, and we make pull graphs. And maybe we've got great people inside who are great at Grafana, but they're bad at programming, which means our input pipeline is rubbish, but it looks pretty. Maybe another organization next door is fantastic at the programming, but they're useless at the Grafana side. So they've got all the data and no visualizations. I think we need to start pooling these resources.
Yeah. So we need to put the people together with the strengths, and we need to kind of have a framework where you can pick what you need, right?
I want to make sure that we're not wasting so much of our own time because everyone else is doing the same thing over and over again in parallel. Let's bring those guys together and see if we can serialize a few of those things so that the next guy that comes along or the next gal that turns up next day is going to be able to say, I'm going to pick this thing off the shelf, I'm going to use it as my baseline, and I'm going to extend it in the way that I need to. Because that's the nature of open source. It's great is that I found a bunch of people that actually were, agree with me on this and actually quite interested in trying to take this forward. So I've got a GitHub repo, which I'm calling the GNP stack, because I thought, let's find a fun name. No, all the fun names are gone. So I was like, okay, well, this is realistically just an assembly of open source things. So let's take the same approach like ELK, and this is the letters. So we've got GNMIC, NATS as a pipeline processor in the middle, and Prometheus as a storage engine at the back. You can move things in and out of this if you want. If you're a Kafka shop, swap NATS out. If you're someone who really wants to use Mimir as a backend, go for it. This is supposed to be interchangeable, but the idea is that the information that we request of our network should be common. The transformations that we make to this information as it's in flight from the device through to the storage should be common. And that will allow us to then, when we want to visualize this in Grafana at the end of the day, to have one set of dashboards that do everything.
That sounds
so it's going to be a challenge and it's going to be an uphill struggle. But at the moment, we're all making the uphill struggle on our own anyway. So if we do it as a team, as a group of people together, perhaps we can get there, all get there in a little bit faster. But more specifically, we can all kind of reap the community benefit of the Jack or the Jill who's got the better skills in one area or another, so that we all even out across the board and get a much more consistent delivery.
Yeah.
I think it will make a massive difference to a lot of people. And this isn't to sort of to dunk on LibreNMS or any of the existing solutions. They're great and they're important, but they're not of work. They're not at the moment able to meet this need of an instant answer to why is it that device has failed, or why is it that I've got Pakinos in this area. And I think that when we've got the devices pushing their insights to us in real time, we should then be able to put those things together in a sense that we can visualize that quickly, mobilize our people towards problems and solve them quicker. And if we're lucky, get ahead of these things so that they never get the opportunity of creating trouble for our customers.
Yeah, that sounds perfect. So thank you very much for your time. There is always this talk about this one guy community. What would be your wish that this guy the next couple of months would do?
If we talk about the network automation community, I think one of the things we've all realized in the last couple of weeks, and definitely leading into the conference, but particularly here in the last few days, we're now all looking in the same direction. There's an awful lot of alignment, but there's not much momentum. We all agree where we're trying to get to. And I think that different people are at different places in maturity on this line. But the good thing is that we're all now looking in the same direction. We all know where we're trying to get to. We all know we know the tools that are available to us to get in the momentum that we need. And I think realistically speaking, there is this kind of challenge between the build versus buy versus Roman's thread from the other day in the NAF Slack was quite succinct. Do it all yourself, do some of it yourself, and do none of it yourself. Yeah. And I think that from different levels of maturity, you'll land in one of those almost instantly. But I think that realistically speaking, it's not really about a maturity as to which one of those you might choose. It's about your organization. It's about your resources, and it's about the skills that you have in-house. Some companies will let you buy nerds. They'll let you go out and get a software engineer and throw them in your team. But most people, if you're in the networking space, you're probably full of networking nerds who code rather than coders who network.
Yeah, yeah.
So be realistic about your capabilities. Know what you can and can't do. And it's not losing, it's not cheating, it's not failing if you go and buy something off the shelf.
Of course, it's
Glue code works, right? You can optimize that tool for your environment by just writing the little snippet that takes you from where you are to where it is.
that's the Linux approach, or how I call it. You pipe all the tools together, and in the end, you have great product.
Do one thing, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's an old adage that will stand the test of time. And I think that in the networking space, there are many options ahead of us right now. Fix the problems that you have in front of your face. If you have to buy something versus you have to build something, make the right answer to that situation that you have there. But I'll tell you this, every single step you take right now, you should try and optimize to create more time.
Yes, of course.
This is the cheat code. If you try and build something that's going to be so complicated that you can't finish it,
Yeah, but
you'll never get anywhere.
there's also the saying, programming is like sex. If you make a mistake, you have to support it whole life. Be careful.
Amazing.
But thank you very much for your time, and have a beer.
Yeah, will do indeed.
Oh, we should definitely have that beer. Cheers to everyone at Autocon, and especially those who weren't able to attend and are hopefully watching the videos from the presentations live, hopefully anytime soon. Otherwise, there'll be a link in the show notes or the description. It was a great conference. Friendships were made, friendships were destroyed, then remade again. We grew as people, we shrunk as people, and then we grew again. So all in all, just a really good time for everyone, and yeah, can't wait for the next one. So thanks for sticking around to the end, all three of our listeners, and have a good one.